previously the dairy mills were right, they had the sums right, they'd spread the nitrogen fertiliser, but now we have to do it on a shoestring with chemical fertiliser. We need to make better use of the slurry, fine. We need to get a lot more from clover, legumes, and the soil. And the soil is the key one that we're missing the trick on.
Hello, I'm Emma-Louise Coffey, and you're welcome to The Dairy Edge, the Teagasc Dairy podcast. We're bringing you the latest information, insights and opinion to improve dairy farm performance. With the deadline looming for entry to the Grassland Farmer of the Year competition, I'm joined this week by two of the judging panel, Maher and John O'Loughlin, to tell us what the competition has meant to farmers in years gone by and why you should enter. And I first asked John O'Loughlin about the challenging grassland year to date.
Yeah, in general, it's been very, very challenging year for grass. We went from a drought into just consistent rain, Emma-Louise, and it has been a challenge. Overall tonnage probably isn't too bad because we've, in the main dairy belts, there's been a lot of droughts that have affected growth rates, but a lot of farms, even when we got the rain, seem to struggle a little bit just to get up and running to maybe what we would expect with the soil moisture deficit return. So in my mind, it's been very challenging. First cuts were back in quantities. We have data there. We measured as part of our sustainability program 8 tonne dry matter per hectare on average for a first cut last year, back to 6.2. And on top of that, there was a lot of silage probably fed, during that drought and even when it was wet. So probably a challenge, I would say.
And to you, John, and maybe a comment on those winter reserves. Second cut has been taken out at the end of August, early September in a lot of farms. So a comment on that maybe.
Yeah, look, John is right. It's been a very unusual year, right, for grass. Probably the most unusual, we've come across in a long, long time. You must remember we had record dry February, record wet March, almost record warm June, almost record wet July, if I'm correct in all those stats. So it's been a roller coaster ride. John is right on the comments he's made about recovery. Grass quality was a nightmare in June and July. The only thing is that's happened lately in the last, I know the rain came, and second cut got delayed, and you'd see the trailers pass on the road as you drive the car around the country and the stuff looks brown rather than green. But there has been a good recovery of late. Grass growth is well on target, if above it. We are in a great place at the moment. So people have managed to get second cut done. That ground is going to come back in. The pasture-based data figures show clearly at the moment that we're on target for our autumn grazing targets. So while it has been an unusual year, a difficult year, a challenging year, at this point in time of the 1st September, we're not in the worst place now in terms of both fodder supply and grass supply. Not in the worst now. And there will be variation in the country. Some of the extreme dry areas will be probably a bit short. Some of the extreme wet areas will have other issues about, trying to grow grass in the wet. But not the worst place now, given where we were at one point in time.
And I suppose to continue with you, John, I suppose the main reason I'm chatting with you today is to hear a little bit about the Grass 10 competition that has come up and the applications are open. But I suppose if we roll back to 2018 and to the start of the Grass 10 campaign, where did it come about? And, I suppose what are you trying to achieve from the outset?
We'd always focused on grass, but things had changed in, I suppose, moving from the noughties into the tens, and a few things became very, very obvious very, very quickly. You have a change in the marketplace. So if you take our green image and you had Origin Green and all that thing coming together, it was a chance to make better use of grass and sell that image. Grass 10 helped that concept, if you want to call it that. We also had data from, say, someone like Liam Hanrahan, who did work with Lawrence Chalou, put all the data together on grass utilised at farm level, showed the impact it had on profit. So every, it was 8 years data to put together. It showed that every tonne of grass utilised per hectare, every additional tonne was worth almost €200 per hectare. So that was a new thing that we hadn't had before. We knew it was good, but we didn't realise it was as good. We all knew about, in terms of, having grass in the diet, in terms of, reducing costs and increasing profits, but this brought us, home to a fair degree, and the figures weren't that dissimilar from dry stock enterprises either. And I suppose the last piece I'll say is, we have environmental compliance coming down the road at the time in terms of greenhouse gas emissions. Once you get into pasture, be it grass or clover, there's reduction in all greenhouse gases, where it's methane, carbon dioxide and nitrous oxide. So there's big wins to be got here. And they felt the best way to approach that was bring a campaign together to bring it to the country and focus on grass.
And John, for ye, I suppose Grassland Agro got involved as an industry partner. I suppose where did you see benefit to the Grass 10 campaign for the entire industry?
Yeah, it's massively beneficial program. The work that John and Joe and John, there's a lot of Johns now, but John Douglas as well do is really, and Fergus as well, John.
Yes. It's back in time, yeah.
Absolute Jen. And continue to do is really, really important, Emma-Louise. So getting that message out there about grass and maybe challenging some of the preconceived notions that the media have about agriculture, getting out that strong message on grass-fed and sustainability, and enabling farmers is hugely, hugely important. And ultimately, there's a huge amount of regulation coming in the fertiliser industries, especially, and getting farmers to grow grass is one thing, but getting them to utilise that is so important.
Emma-Louise, I left out one piece of jigsaw which I should have said, which follows on about John and enabling the farmer to do better. We forgot about pasture base and the database. We didn't have a database before, and the database clearly showed that we had ideas of farmers reaching 13 and 14 and 15 tonnes of grass matter per hectare being grown, right? In theory that was possible, but the database clearly showed that we weren't reaching our potential. So this was another big plus for having a campaign like the Grass 10 campaign.
And as part of the campaign, I've alluded to the competition. So we've had 5 years of competition to date, John. And I suppose we've talked to lots of the champions, and they always talk about what they've learned and the merit of the competition, what it has added to their farm. But I suppose for people who are listening today who are thinking, I think maybe I'm good enough, I might have a chance in this competition. They fill out an application form, but maybe they don't know what to expect. So can you talk us through the rest of the process? You get that application form in, and what happens next?
The idea is to recognise those farmers who are doing a good job at utilising grass and pasture. And the competition has evolved over time. Those people, like you said, become champions or ambassadors and, help farmers, improve their own grassland. That's what they're basically ambassadors. It's fine for people like myself or John to talk about, doing a good job at growing and utilising grass and incorporating clover and all that, but the farmer has to do it in reality at farm level, and this is where the Grassland Farmer of the Year piece comes to its own, because we hold events on all those winning farms. So it starts off with an application form which can be got through the Grass 10 website or the Teagasc website, and you see Grassland Farmer of the Year. You can enter that way. There's also people like myself and John Douglas and in the east of the country, and Joe Dunphy in the west. If they want to talk to us, we can give them advice on it as well, and if they want to express an interest in entering, that can be done as well. So we meet those people through Grass 10 courses and our events around the country. And then I suppose you move on to the next piece. Then we're able to pick up a lot of the data on, we'll say, the grass production side through pasture base or other measurement databases, and we start pre-screening from there. But and farms get shortlisted on the basis of most of that data. However, you don't get a full handle on the nutrient management, you don't get a full handle on sward renewal, the grazing infrastructure, the approach to sustainability. I can keep going here unless you visit the farm. And that's where the farm visits come in, and that's where the judging team, and there's people assigned to each of those areas. So John here does the nutrient management side, including the NUE as well, or the nutrient use efficiency. We have judges from the Farmers Journal, the Department of Agriculture, FBD, Teagasc, AIB. So, and they all have an area that we appraise. And just by asking the questions alone, the farmer, they get a fairly good idea as to what they're doing well or what's not going well for them, because the questions will either expose that or enhance their chances of winning the competition.
And that farm visit gives farmers the opportunity to express themselves and, as you say, show off all of the good stuff that they're doing on farm. And if we think about highlights or learnings for ye from farms, John, like to you, is there anything in particular that has stuck out to you from the farms that you've gotten out to visit?
Yeah, there's loads, Emma-Louise. Like some of the stories there have been fantastic. Aidan Maguire, I think it was a privilege for all of us, John.
That was a phenomenal day, yes.
That was like, you know, like this sounds really cringy, like, but it was like nearly the hairs on the back of your neck could stand up, like going around listening to him, his story, meadows, like real salt of the earth, family farm, brought us around, explained that he was thinking about maybe getting out of farming, and then to see how he turned around by using grass, super. Last year, this is one I haven't run past John either, but we were at Hanbridge's farm, and they were winter milk, like, and when you think winter milk, you think 3 ton of meal, maize, beet, you name it, real Teagasc Moor Park spec. But what it highlighted for me was that the message about grass is right, because it was working for them and their type of cows, you know, that we are right, because there's a lot of maybe with banding, there's question marks, what should we do and stuff like that at farm level, but I really reinforced it. And John asked me a question coming down to prepare for us, why should farmers enter the Emma-Louise? And I was like, jeepers, I didn't think any more about it because I was rushing. And I was coming down in the car and I was thinking, you know, going back to what we said there about farmers maybe being frustrated about getting a lambasting in the media, you know, the green agenda. I think farmers should enter because it gives them a platform to maybe represent their discussion group, represent their industry, their sector, whether it's lamb or beef or dairy, their county, whatever it is, you know, to be a champion or an ambassador, to tell the stories of all the good work that's going on in farm. Because like it is great to have John Maher or Aidan Brennan or any of these big names out in your farm, like, but at the same time, I think that's the real benefit, the platform that the Grass 10 competition can offer. Because really, John, now, in my opinion, the competition side, not the courses, but that's really, we need the farmers more than they need us, I would argue. Would you?
No, it's fair competition.
Is that fair? Yeah, and that's what makes the competition so special. All the past winners, all those, you know, big names that we know, and that's what gives it the magic. So I think if we think about it in that context of that, you can represent maybe, you know, dairy farming or beef or lamb or whatever it's going to be, I think is a huge opportunity. And of course the prize money, which is a huge benefit as well, John.
Yeah, and the prize winner this year, the overall prize winner is 10,000, so it's a big increase on times past. You know,
yeah, it's a nice turn.
We've had prize funds about 5,000 or 6,000 for the overall winner, but this is bigger now. You know, and the competition is broader now. And I mentioned sustainability. This comes in terms of not just in terms of environmental, but also in terms of the social side, the profitability side, and the other concept that we brought into it is with FBD is the health and safety side. You know, so it's not just all about grass, but you won't get a handle on that until you get to farm. So initially there's screening going on, and that short lists quite a number, and then that's then whittled down into the category winners.
And to you, John, you know, any of those memorable moments or biggest learnings that you've seen?
Yeah, there's been sizable ones, and there's been what I call wow moments. You know, I suppose I'm doing this a little bit longer than John here, but anyway, I go back to different days. You know, I remember a few that will stand out. I remember being on the Heffernan's farm in Kilkenny and their approach and how they did things. The three whiteboards and how they managed the farm with you know, Mark, Billy and Liam, and the grazing infrastructure was just phenomenal. You just stand and look in awe, to be honest. Been on Danny Birmingham's farm in West Clare. This is, you know, very, very heavy farm. And I had been on the farm in 2012 and never forget that day. It was October. I was doing a project on phosphorus with a number of other people in Teagasc, and we were measuring samples of grass, and you know, that farm was floating, the word I'd used. And then to come back then, and about 7-8 years later, and see what Danny was doing, and the motto he had, people are asking about grazing, and he said, well, it's very simple, we graze when we can. And you'd never forget those days. A year before that, we were with Niall O'Mara in Galway, near Ballinasloe, and he used the term, we're grass farmers who produce beef, right? So you just those kind of things that you don't forget. I suppose last year myself and John were lucky enough to be on Jim Fitzgerald's farm, and the clover just blew you away within 5 minutes, and you just know. Right. So then we've had other people. I'll just mention very quickly, I suppose, some great headlines. Mike Birmingham was a guy who entered the competition, was a recent new entrant who wanted to learn fast. If you take somebody who learned a lot from the competition, he has won. He knew by the questions straight away, even though he won a category in it, he knew he had to move on into other areas and improve. And since then, I'll say he never looked back. He won't like me for saying that, but, phenomenal in terms of the performance he's had. Again, it's a bit like Aidan Maguire's story, to be honest. We had an event in Sean O'Donnell's farm last year up in Mayo. People would argue that the Grass 10 competition and geography and Grassland Farmer of the Year, people in that part of the country would struggle. That wouldn't be correct. If you were at Sean O'Donnell's event last year in July,
Good one, John.
it was one of the best we were ever at. It was phenomenal, his performance on the day. We can keep going here, I'll be honest with you.
And it sounds like, you were inspired when you went out to farms, and I suppose the idea of those champions and the open days on those farms, it is, I suppose they have a lot more credibility, and it comes back to what you say, you can advise a farmer, but these guys are in the trenches every day, and when there's a drought or there's heavy rainfall, they are in the exact same position as every other farmer in the country. And look, as you say, there's a really nice prizes and really nice opportunity to open up your farm and be that representative for the industry. I suppose just a little side note, as we conclude, John, you're working in the fertiliser sector, and you alluded to the fact that there is regulation coming down the tracks, that it is going to change the way we farm. I suppose the conversation around fertiliser has been a hot topic in the last number of years, but I suppose working in that area specifically, how have you seen things evolve in maybe the last 5 to 10 years? Yeah,
well, without incriminating myself now too badly, Emma-Louise, I suppose the attitude we have towards nitrogen. So to give you an example, the Dairy Miz Group, which would have been kind of probably the catalyst or the foundation for an awful lot of the research and the models that we have in place. In the mid-2000s, the average chemical nitrogen applied from a report published that I found there a couple of years ago was 370 kilos per hectare, right? We're trying to grow the same amount of grass now on 150, so the two don't add up. You just simply can't grow grass without nitrogen. Or you can't grow pasture. And I think we need to change our language.
Yeah, pasture, yes. Absolutely.
Isn't that a more...
To incorporate clover, yes.
Yeah. We need
and other species.
But we talk about grass, but we need to kind of evolve the language to talk about pasture now. So if you put in simple maths, right, and I run through a few figures here, it takes 30 kilos of nitrogen to grow a ton of pasture. A farm stocked at 2.5 livestock units per hectare. Cow, right, John, we'll go through the maths. Cow, 300 day lactation, 15 kilos of dry matter intake. On average, plus or minuses, but we say 15 kilos, that's 4,500 kilos, right? You take 60 days by 10 kilos of dry cow silage, which is a euphemism for any absolute garbage that's gathered up during the year. That's a fair comment, John?
We'll call it forage, John.
Yeah, that's a strong one now. But if we take the 60, right, that's 600 kilos, so that's 5.1 ton dry matter. Multiplied by our stocking rate at 2.5, that's 12.5, which sounds doable. But in reality, that's intake.
Eaten.
Yeah. So we need to grow an extra 25%. We'll say 20.
We'll say 20.
Yeah. So that's 15 ton dry matter per hectare. So if you take that first figure I gave, which is the 30 kilos, that's 30 by 450. Or 30 by 15 is 450, I should say, sorry. So that's 450 kilos of nitrogen that we need to get from... Previously, the dairy mills were right. They had the sums right. You'd spread the nitrogen fertilizer. But now we have to do it on a shoestring with chemical fertilizer. We need to make better use out of slurry. Fine. We need to get a lot more from clover, legumes.
And the soil.
and the soil is the key one that we're missing the trick on. So there's a lot of work going on at the moment. There's a future soils project, a lot of brilliant researchers and up and coming researchers like Mike Eady and Mike Egan and all, who was an established researcher, but Mike Eady's his student, and Mick and Anya Murray are working on a project to understand the power of the soil. And that's one that we hadn't really a handle on properly, I'd say, John.
I think that's a reasonable argument. If we look at the stats, John, I think it was sent the other day. We in 2009, I know it was a shocking year. It was low input, low. You had a wet year, and you had low prices for farm outputs. But we only spread about 30%, 1/3 of the P and K we spread in 1990. And people were kind of, I would say, John, using nitrogen to compensate for poor soil fertility, lime, P and K. Now that's turned around, which is great. We're not all the way, but we're well on that journey, and I think that's a big part of getting more from the soil, John. Yeah,
so listen, the simple maths, the soil has the potential to provide up to 300 kilos of nitrogen through this process called mineralisation. But that range is massive. In some parts of like a wonderful part of the world called Kilmady, the previous research done showed that you only get maybe 70 kilos of nitrogen per hectare per year, but in Pallaskenry you get 220, and as the crow flies, they're very close to each other. So there's a lot of variation. It's understanding that on farm and then using your clover, then using your fertiliser strategically, optimising soil health. So in relation to where fertiliser maybe is going, we've gone to 100% prescription-based model where you look at the 3 pillars of soil health. You look at the chemical, which is your pH, P and K, the biological, which is the new kind of airy-fairy stuff that maybe farmers aren't as aware of, but that's that mineralisation. That's very, very powerful. We're looking at that, and we're looking at then the structure, which is the physical state of the soil, and then the grass 10 walks. I've been doing my routine, John, on the
digging the hole
to limited success. Yeah, I've dug a few holes for myself now for sure over the course of the walks, but like you actually get farmers to we dig a sod and we go through, John, and we show them what structure looks like and how to understand that, and that can have a massive yield penalty. And we do that through the sustainability program with the co-ops, because ultimately we're in a fight for survival for the derogation, and that's we either play ball with that in the fertilizer industry, or else we go extinct anyways because the derogation goes and most of the cows in the country are gone and there's no demand for fertilizer. So we're trying to be proactive, I suppose, to support farmers in reducing the chemical nitrogen, John.
Sure, absolutely. We're on that road. This is where clover comes into its own, and it's a bigger piece of jigsaw than just nitrogen fertilizer. It's the soil, the clover, the other pieces as well. But the competition has evolved, and to do well in the competition now, the clover piece has to be fairly good on the farm, to be fair now, right? To understand. However, I will tell you a little story to finish off, if that's okay, right? Just to explain how the competition just means for different people, right? So Danny Birmingham won the first award of the heavy soils category many years ago, right? And I've mentioned that earlier. But people came to that walk in April of 2019. Now, the spring of 2019 was favourable, but it was great to have Danny have cows out full-time grazing on that piece of land, because it is challenging environment down there in West Clare. But 2 farmers came that day, father and son team, Pat Barry, Sean Barry, and a few years later they won the heavy soils category of that competition. So it just goes to show, I met them on the day, we had a good chat, they were thrilled to be down there, had never been on the farm before, and they said, well, if this man can do this, so can we, and the rest is history.
I will tell another story about John Maher though.
Oh, no.
That Mike Birmingham told I don't know if I get away with this on the sod pod, which is the...
Can I leave the room now?
The leading agricultural... Emma-Louise going to murder me now, but I couldn't resist. But Mike was telling us that he won the dairy category winner. He was coming out the steps just as we're looking out here, and John Maher gave him nod, the curly finger, and he cornered him, and he said, you need to do more walks next year. And I think there was a few expletives used in his version of the story, but like that's also what you're getting yourself in for now, for anyone who does enter the competition, and that's a true story, John.
Well, he's a fit man now, John.
You'll get some homework if you enter the competition. And look, yeah, John, no harm to mention, there is a great podcast that you present, the Sod Pod, and the likes of Danny Birmingham and Mike Birmingham have contributed to that. I guess the competition is still open for this year, and I suppose you can get your applications in until the end of September. And I suppose, you've alluded to it, John, you and the team, John Douglas and Joe Dunphy, are happy to speak with people who are interested.
If they want to, or they can enter through the
through the application process themselves.
And /Grass10. Yeah,
I suppose when we're having a Grass 10 conversation, it would be remiss of me not to mention Padraig Walsh, who has been around since the outset of.
Absolutely, he'd been chairman of Grass 10 from the
and I would say a champion of Grassland for as long as I'm around it, and
a long time
before that. And I suppose if you embellish me for a minute, I think we talk about K, and there's an issue with K on farms, potassium levels in our soils. And I was at a Damer discussion group, and I happened to be walking from one field to another, and Padraig was walking beside me, and he was the first one to really explain it, that we're producing all this grass, we're managing it well, and so we have to take all these surplus bales, and this is just really killing the K. And it was the first time somebody had explained it in really simple terms for my little brain to understand. But I suppose, John, a comment from you, you've worked with him since 2018 and before that, and his contribution to the programme.
Best way I can say, he was the ultimate champion of grass. And, I remember being on the farm back in the early 90s. Pat Dillon reminded me of the story that he brought the Teagasc board to show what could be done in terms of grassland, and as I say, the rest is history.
Yeah, and look, it's as I say, it's good to mention him because he's made a huge contribution to this campaign.
Massive, and he was our chairman, and it's unfortunate to have lost him in the middle of the Grass 10 campaign. Without him, none of this would have ever happened. So it was sad to lose him, but it was great to have him when we did.
Thanks, John Maher and John O'Loughlin. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much.
Man.
That's it for this week's episode of the Dairy Edge podcast. And my thanks to John Maher and John O'Loughlin for joining me on this week's show. Don't forget to rate, review and subscribe to the podcast. You can listen on Apple and Google Podcasts as well as Spotify. And for more information, go to the Teagasc website at teagasc.ie. I'm Emma-Louise Coffey, and join me next time for your Dairy Edge.